I got his wallet, and it had that white soot. And there's another thing. The white soot that was in the lobby. It's not from fire. It's from explosion. Fire leaves a different type of soot. So there's no ifs, ands, and buts that there was huge explosions below and came up into the lobby. You cannot question that. So now, so with Bobby, so my thing is he came over from Fulton Street. He made the decision that he was going to go to the top. Now, we got no phone calls from him. And I would think if the plane had hit, he would start running. So certainly there was no injuries to his back. Back of his skull was intact. And he had post-mortem burns. That means I think he was walking in and the huge explosion took place, and I think the glass and the force of the explosion did the damage to him. And then someone finally picked him up and took him to the morgue right away, and again, he was one of the first 10 bodies. So I'm getting to the point, I could care less who did this. I know what the truth is. But again, people will look at me, what do you know? I'm not a college, I'm not working at Princeton. I wish the Princeton people would come out. I know Falk, he has come out and he feels very strongly about what happened on 9/11. But the thing is, people look at me, Lee Hamilton, again, if I had seen Lee Hamilton when he said this, I was on a TV show with him from Canada, and he says, well, I think Bob's really speaking from emotion and he really doesn't have his facts right. So if I would have been there, I would have strangled him. And there's a man, Lee Hamilton, I don't want to get too far, but Lee Hamilton, I sat in his office with the Jersey girls. This is after the first report came out, the Blue Book. You had, I think, 28 redacted pages in it. And we were talking to them, and we wanted to know, why did they redact 28 pages about the Saudis? Here are the Saudi Arabians, they left the country. All the hijackers supposedly came from Saudi Arabia. Well, we wanted to know what the hell's going on here. And Lee Hamilton is exactly what he said. He says, I really understand what you're saying, but he said it was up to me because of national security, I couldn't release that information. Now let's go back to the 80s. October Surprise. If you don't know what it is, Google it. He helped squash that investigation. And then when I'm looking through the Iran-Contra trials, quote from Lee Hamilton, because of national security, we can't give any more information about this. We'll talk about a gatekeeper. And this man's running the 9/11 Commission hearing. And then he tells me I'm emotional about this. Well, this is what we're dealing with in the United States. It's my job as a parent to find the truth. I found the truth. I don't care what anyone says. As much as I want an investigation, I've done my investigation. But what, I'm not Henry Kissinger, I'm not a politician. Why would anybody trust any of these people? Who are we going to have that's going to give us an investigation? We're going to have to search wide and far to find good people to do that. I wouldn't trust anybody in the United States. Especially when we're involved in government. So, I truly, truly support everything that's happening with Building 7, but I'm on my journey. And I know it, it's my transformation. And I just want to end on this as far as, I don't care if someone goes to jail. I don't care if someone hangs. There's so many people that were involved in 9/11. But the fact that the 9/11 Commission report and NIST covered up these explosions, it's either Osama bin Laden was working with the United States government, or someone else murdered my son through use of explosions. But I think personally, with this, I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And I'm just talking to my son. Please remember, I'm not speaking for anyone else in the 9/11 movement. I'm not speaking for the families. I speak for myself. That I believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the Muslim world had nothing to do with the murder of my son. And that's important to me, because I've had the opportunity, I spoke at a conference in Bogota. It's that empathy that much of America doesn't have. To see what my son's death. But then to talk to the people, I went to a conference in Bogota, 2005 I think it was, on violence around the world. People from Bali were there, Chechnya. And then talking to the people in South America, Central America. I still try to work in the SOA, School of Americas down at Fort Benning. I've spoken down there. That, as Valerie was talking about, the innocent victims of the world. Because not just the United States, this is the way governments work. It's pure McILvaine. All governments, not just the United States. Again, I don't care if they convict anybody for 9/11. But this is what has to stop. This is what people have to look at. That's why you have to study history. How many people have died since World War II? And innocent civilians dying. As Valerie said, wars used to be fought between soldiers. Now nothing but innocent civilians. And we're talking millions. And they talk to a mother in Ecuador because her two daughters had, quote, left-leaning thoughts, labor unions. And they just disappeared off the face of the earth. The black woman living in Colombia. We had dinner, and I was eating dinner with a lot of people from, South and Central America. Third-degree burns, which she's healed, but third-degree burns all over her body. Lost her kids and her husband. Of course, it's terror, but it wasn't the FARC. It was the paramilitaries from Colombia. And the stories go on and on and on. This is what we have to look at. It's all innocent civilians. And governments, not just the United States government, all governments, they don't care. They live by that Machiavellian philosophy. And this is where I would rather go. I want accountability, but people really have to look at history. And it's not astounding that a government would kill 3,000 people. Not, of course, they wouldn't know how many people are going to die. This is the way governments work. Speaking Oliver North in the 80s, he didn't care that every human being in the South Central, every inner city in the United States were taking drugs. That's food industry. Built a prison. Because he felt, in the Iran country, he felt that he's doing his duty for the country. He could care less how many people were ODing on crack. Well, this is what government people do. It's the government, it's the nation that counts. So it's not beyond my realm of thinking that, why wouldn't the United States? Look at the world the way it is. Why wouldn't they do 9/11? And that's why I'd rather people see that, no, the Muslims had nothing to do with it. And I don't know where to go from it. And I'll bring you right into my introduction. This is what Richard Gage has done. It's because of people like Richard Gage, I have an opportunity. People come to family members. As difficult as it is, but we have the French film crew here. And they were back down in Pennsylvania in January. Because of the Building 7. Then I have an opportunity to speak to the world. I've had the opportunity to do other DVDs. So it gives me and I will tell the truth. And I don't care what other people say. No one's done the legwork done. And they call me a conspiracy theory. Well, I'll tell them to stick it up their ass. I don't really care. I said, you can't put yourself in my shoes, and your child's murdered, and the guy lives up the street that murdered your child because the judge in the county doesn't want an investigation because he's a good friend of his. Well, that's basically what it is. These pieces of shit, what did they do? It's all junk, absolute junk. And they act sanctimonious when they're speaking to people because they gave us all the recommendations. How to make this better, stop terrorism. Well, that's my goal in life. That's my journey in life. And Richard Gage, he has done so much to keep this in the public eye. He's an architect of 23 years. I stay away from This is the first time I've done this. This is very painful. I'm a wreck. Doing this all week because all I'm doing is looking at my son's death. Usually I get very global. We can talk about the put options. We can talk about, of course, NORAD. I could go for hours on that. But here's the nitty-gritty. Tower 7, of course, they never mentioned in the book. And then they give me a little line here about some stupid-ass fireball going down and exploding everything underneath, which is an impossibility. So Richard, an architect of 23 years, and the over 1,400 architects and engineers that he started, he goes around the world. He keeps the issue alive. And me as a family member, that means so much, because as much as it brings me down, it's so necessary, because I owe it to my son. And the thanks I have to give to Richard and the fact that he keeps that out there is mind-boggling to me, because it keeps my son's name alive. I get the opportunity to speak because he's working 80 hours a week. I feel guilty. I put a lot of time in, but I'm not working 80 hours a week. He's putting 80 hours a week in because he didn't believe the story. And it's so concrete. No matter what you say, people look at me and they get starry-eyed. I'm ostracized in my neighborhood. They're just scared to death that I might bring up 9/11. My wife's scared to death. We don't go out socially anymore because she's scared to death that 9/11 might come up. And I go on one of my tirades like this. And then as the asshole, one of my friends questions me, well then we really have a problem. And that's what my wife's afraid of. Because I really have a difficult time. I remember talking to a psychiatrist, and he says, we're talking about depression. Depression is a big part of so many people in 9/11. And it's very difficult to, just keep looking at this and not get depressed. But the other side of the coin of depression is anger. And it's so important to me, and I know it sounds not funny, but sort of tragic, that it's so important for me to keep the anger. And I really have to work hard to get around that. I want to be angry every day, but the thing is, I have to work out. I really have to try to keep myself in good shape. You have to find diversions. So I've learned, I stay angry all morning. I do all my reading. I go to Barnes & Noble, have a latte, and do my reading. That's good for me. And then there's a certain point in the day, cut it off. Work around the house, and of course working out's a big thing. Like this week, I spent the whole week. I do this at night, I'm wide awake all night long. Can't do it. Last night I couldn't sleep. I'm so worked up. It's, I told someone yesterday, it's like taking drugs. This gives me a high, because you have people that are searching for these answers.
Inspiration.
But then, when you take drugs, what happens? You fall. And this, I'll ride home, then, that's so you're back to your neighborhood where no one can give a shit about 9/11. They don't want to hear it. They want to go on their lives. That's depressing. Really, really depressing. Yeah, right. Right. So, I know Mr. Gage is going to come up here, and again, I can't say enough what he's done for, quote, the 9/11 movement, but what he's done for me. Because of Building 7, the fact that we're on Geraldo, that was unbelievable. I did 10 interviews around the country that week. When it comes out again, I will do 10 more. Every time I do an interview, I will give my message. So I thank Richard Gage for that. Because otherwise, these names, everybody dies out. And the fact that you can't argue with science. And Richard Gage has started out, I don't know how much you started out with, Richard, but it's up to over 1,400. And I really, really want to give him thanks for that and welcome him to the stage.